Days of hunger, won't you buy them for me? Days of hunger, won't you buy them for me?
Privi di meraviglia, restiamo sordi al sublime.
Devoid of wonder, we remain deaf to the sublime. This is the title of this meeting, a title that brought about many questions. How can we talk about wonder during a pandemic? How can we use the word sublime when reality is so dramatic? This is a phrase that was written by Abraham Heschel, a Jewish philosopher, and it was actually quoted also by Don Giussani. So I would like to welcome you all to this meeting tonight, where we would like to understand better the meaning of this phrase, and we are going to do it with Professor Josef Weiler. I would like to thank him for being here with us.
Lo ringrazio anche per il sacrificio di essere venuto da noi.
And I would like to thank him because he came all the way from New York to Rimini.
Weiler è stato presente.
Josef Weiler participated in many meetings. He talked about European right, international law, and he talked about the Bible. And so we are really happy and grateful to have him here to talk about the title of the meeting in this situation, because Heschel had to escape from Germany, from the Nazis, and he then moved to America. He lost many relatives during the Holocaust, and from his personal experience, it is not easy to actually accept this kind of title. So what do you think about this title? Thank you everybody. You know that I would never miss a meeting. I would like to start with a prayer to the God of Israel. I hope that my words are pleasant to you, and you are my Lord and my Redemptor. when we hear the words wonder and sublime, we think about something fantastic in the nature. Well, in Italy, it is not difficult to find beauty in nature. We are in front of God's creation, so wonder and the sublime. So this is our immediate reaction. But since we know the way Heschel used to think, I don't think this is the kind of wonder he was referring to. When we talk about wonder, we talk about something that is wonderful, but there is also something else. For instance, I write a letter to a friend and he doesn't reply. I write a second letter and then a third letter and I never get a reply. And I can say that in a way your behavior is a wonder to me, because I cannot understand this kind of behavior. And I think that I'm true to Heschel's way of thinking, but I don't know whether he would agree. In this case, I'm not referring to a friend who doesn't reply to my letters, but I'm referring to God. And I can say to God, I'm surprised by your behavior. Why? I believe that all of you that are following this meeting, which is in itself a kind of wonder, once or twice in their life was in a way angry against God and was surprised by God's behavior. So you talked about the personal life of Heschel. Let's think about the Nazis who killed, assassinated millions of Jewish, of homosexuals, and they tortured them and then they killed them. They were innocent people. Their only mistake was to be Jewish or to be homosexual. And we're talking about millions of people. So where was God at the time? How could you let something like this happen in the world you created? And I think that everyone here, at least once, must have had a similar thought. And then there is a second aspect. For instance, there is a tsunami and thousands of people are dead, or earthquake. And now we have the pandemic. Millions of people fell ill. 500,000 people died because of the pandemic in the world. So where are you, God? I'm surprised by your absence. I'm surprised by your indifference. So the difference between these two examples, that kind of fight I have with God. Well, on the one hand, we have the human evil nature, but then there is something else, which is a natural catastrophe, like we are experiencing now with the pandemic, but consequences are dramatical in both cases. So where were you, God, during the Holocaust, during the period of the gulags in Russia, during the lifetime of Mao Zedong, and so many other examples I could make in our recent history? Why did you create a world where such evil can take place? Why did you not intervene to put an end to this evil? Well, the answer is not difficult. In the creation of men and women, because that's what is written in the Bible, he created man, and then he created a woman. Anyway, what is the essence of the creation of man in the biblical vision? There are some characteristics. First, man, for the way he was created, can actually make a distinction between good and evil. Let's talk about the first murder, when Cain killed his brother, as you all remember. Maybe you don't know, I'm just joking, I'm sure you all remember this part of the Bible. So Cain was, protested against the punishment, but it doesn't say, Lord, you didn't tell me that I should not kill anybody, because this is the meaning of the whole story. Human beings have the possibility to choose between good and evil, and Cain knew that killing his brother was something wrong, immoral, unethical. So, this possibility to choose between good and evil is part of our human nature. And this is the first characteristic. Then there is a second characteristic, equally important. We have the freedom to choose. And Giussani also insisted a lot on this freedom, on this aspect. We are free to choose whether we wanted to do good or evil. It is not only that we can actually understand what is good and what is evil, we can really choose how to behave, if we want to behave in a good way or in a bad way. And this is an essential part of human beings in this world created by God. So this has also a theological meaning. And we are taught that we have to love God with all our heart and our souls. Here again, we have the choice. If we can't say no to God, it doesn't have any value if we say yes, because we have no choice. So there is this opportunity to choose between no and yes, good and evil. And this is an essential part of being a man or a woman. But there is also a social and individual consequence of this human characteristic in the biblical vision, the biblical conception. This means that in the world, the responsibility to choose between a good, ethical, moral world and a bad, evil world is a responsibility that is given to men. I read a book by the Polish writer who was awarded the Nobel Prize last year, Olga Tokarczuk. It is called Jacob's Books, and the book deals with this problem. Theologists and philosophers say we believe in God Almighty and we believe that God is good. It's a God of love. So if God let something like the Holocaust happens, this means that either he cannot put an end to it, that would mean that he is not almighty, or he can do it but chooses not to, so that means he is not good. So in that book, this is how the problem is analyzed. It's a very interesting book, and the answer that is given by one of the characters in the book is this. God says, I had a choice to create a world where there was no evil, but then again, we wouldn't have been human beings. We would have been like robots because we wouldn't have the possibility to choose. And if I have to choose between a world without evil and a world with human beings, well, I preferred to create a world with men and women. So this is the first sense of wonder. Now, where is the wonder that we find in Heschel's works? It isn't only a responsibility of men that the kind of world we create. This is something that goes beyond man's responsibility. So it is by confronting the evil behavior of men, we are met by wonder. Wonder is not only beautiful natural scenery. It is actually the behavior of man. And wonder creates the idea of sublime. And here I can give you an example of my personal, familiar history that really shows this sense of wonder. I have Italian relatives who live in Trieste. They've been living there for many years. During the Second World War, they were hidden in a Catholic church for 3 years. And those who actually helped them were risking their own lives, because if they had been caught, they would have been killed, because they had actually hidden this Jewish family. But they helped them nonetheless. This is wonder. This is a wonder that cannot be created if the world were not created the way it is. So, in front of the evil of man, humanity can actually emerge, stand out. This is a sublime. This kind of behavior shows what it is meant by created according to the image of God. We have the capacity of this kind of wonder, but to actually put it into practice is the real wonder. This is the meaning that Heschel gives to sublime. That is not nature, but human behavior. So the COVID situation actually is closer to the second example I gave, that of earthquakes and tsunamis and so on. That is to say, natural catastrophes, and man's behavior has actually nothing to do with it. So here we can actually be angry at God, because nature is something that belongs, so to speak, to God. And here, I have had to look up part of the Genesis. The first catastrophe in the Apocalypse was actually the deluge. And as we found it we all know what the deluge is actually. Well, no, I'm kidding. Anyway, I'm asking you, when was the last time you actually read the text of the Bible on the deluge? Once during a meeting in the past, I was talking to about 500 voluntary workers here at the meeting, the staff, the voluntary staff, and I asked them who can actually say, by holding up their hands, to have read the whole gospel. You can read it all in one afternoon. Well, no one raised their hand. So, well, this was actually, my way to show that not everyone knows the Bible and the Gospel. Anyway, so is the delusion a tool in the hands of God to punish the evil of man in the world? And to punish animals as well. Well, they did not commit any mistake. Why did God save the fish, for instance? So there is Noah's ark and so on. I'm asking about the time. You still have half an hour. Half an hour? No, it's too much. I don't need that much. And then they come down from Noah's Ark and they see the rainbow. And I would now like to read what God says at this moment. Obviously, everybody knows already what I'm going to read. It's chapter 18. Verses 21 and 22. And God, after this experience, says, "Never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done." What does this mean? So we are talking about the inclination of the human heart. So that means that evil is inside of us, but we have the power to reject the evil we have inside us and make a different choice in our lives. And again, God says, "I will never use nature again to punish man." So this is verse 21. Then 22, this is really sublime. "As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease." So that means that nature will follow its own rules. Summer and winter, day and night. This doesn't have a theological meaning. We don't look at nature to understand what was the will of God. The prayers for the rain, those who pray for rain, for instance. Well, if we read this text, they don't have any value, any meaning. Because if we pray for rain and God does not give us rain, what should we think? That He is punishing, that God is punishing everyone, also those who are innocent? God states here, nature is nature, and it doesn't have a different meaning. It is just nature, It can be positive, happy. We go to the beach, to the seaside, the sun is shining. Sometimes it can be sad because there are also earthquakes, tsunamis, and so on. That is nature. And in this case, COVID is part of nature itself. I know priests and rabbis and priests of different religions who say that this is the way God has to punish human beings, for instance, for homosexual marriages. Well, this is blasphemy, I think. So here again we are met by a challenge that calls for a different kind of wonder, because even though nature is nature, as we said, and I read it again, as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. And then we can add also storms and COVID. So, well, where is the wonder here? Wonder as it is understood by Eschel, that leads us to the sublime. For instance, the work of doctors and nurses who risked their lives, and many of them actually died because of COVID, and in spite of the great risk, they put themselves at the service of humanity to react to this big challenge. I was here in 2016, I think, that there was an earthquake in Italy, and the Grand Hotel in Rimini actually started to tremble itself. So before the arrival of public services, before the Italian government started to do anything, people went there in the areas hit by the earthquake, even though they didn't have any obligation to do so, just to help, to react to this natural event. This is wonderful. And I could give you like another million examples. So this is wonder, and this is sublime. In a world where there is the evil nature of man that can lead to the Holocaust, and where is nature that can be sun, but it can also be dark, there is the power of man to try and behave that in such a way that justifies the creation of man in the image of God. So I think this is how Eschel thought of the fact that a life devoid of wonder does not lead to the sublime. So we can say that a life with this human wonder does lead us to the sublime. Thank you.
A questo punto mi viene una domanda.
Well, at this stage, I'd like to ask a question. You've mentioned the nurses that helped ill people, and in many other times in Italy, in history, there were people that took action to save other people. Why did they do so? What has emerged in them? Was there a wonder that they saw and they could recognize in the other something wonderful? And then I also add another point. The Psalms, for example, are full of references to God, thanking Him for the nature that they received. to recognize the creator in nature. So wonder not just as an end in itself, but as gratitude, a form of gratitude. What do you think about this? Well, it's easier to reply to the second question. What I've said, according to my interpretation of Heschel's way of thinking, does not exclude other types of wonder. At the beginning of my talk, I said that when we talk about wonder and sublime, immediately we think about Psalms and the fantastic narrative of the creation. This is certainly wonderful. If we listen to Mozart's music, we think about the sublime and we see the wonder of nature. Well, we feel that kind of wonder. We think it's something fantastic. Well, that's true. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, and it can lead to this sense of sublime. But the same God that has created these things that King David mentioned in the Psalms also created earthquakes, also created COVID, also created tsunami. And that's the challenge. Without excluding the other type of wonder that is more common, we would say, how great is this God that created such a beautiful nature? There is also this other side of nature, which is challenging. And what I've tried to do is to make you understand that the real wonder is in people, in the people that have been created in the image of God, that it can respond to the challenges that I've mentioned in my examples. The first question is more difficult. I'll try to answer. I'll try to give you some sort of interpretation. I'd like to mention a couple of points. First, I will refer to our personal experience. There can be an earthquake. Sometimes we feel a voice inside without seeing anybody, without hearing anybody, without going to the church. Perhaps we have a voice inside us telling us, you know what you have to do now. You have to go and help. And if you can't do it directly, you have to give some financial resources and support somebody in some way or another. It is human ontology that can distinguish between evil and good. That means that we know what should be done in a certain situation. On the other hand, social life is important, because human virtue can also be learned. We can see examples, as in your tradition, you have saints and so on. And these examples just not tell us what should be done. They teach us that it is not enough to know what should be done, but one has to go and take action and do it. And here we have the example of the other that can help us respond to this internal voice that has already told us what should be done. In this sense, social pressure is not negative, it is positive. Unfortunately, this is the best I can do to reply to your first question. Okay, so I will insist a little bit. There may be times in our lives, sometimes maybe more important than others, but there may be times when we, for example, see a child or see heroic people. We might see a wonder that makes us look beyond and makes us say, how is that possible? Just like before a tsunami, we can equally say, how is it possible that this world exists, that we exist? We may ask ourselves this question, and wonder on these occasions is more than a sentiment. It is becoming aware of something that may be taken for granted. So, in this case, a person may look at the world with wonder and open up questions that will lead to the origin of all of this. Well, you insist with your question, and I will insist with my answer. Well, each of us plays their own role. Well, as I said, I didn't want to give you an exclusive answer that is saying what is wonder, what is sublime, etc. I was always jealous of my wife because she could give birth, she could generate life. That's a privilege of women. But I had an advantage. I have 5 children, and the first one to hug these children was me. I could take the baby and pass it to my wife. So I was the first human being that could touch my own creatures, and this is something wonderful. This is really great to see how this new baby has entered the world, and I was the first one that could hold him or her. My children are all saints. Oh, I hope that was the case. But even monsters were born. Hitler was born. I may wonder before such a creation. I should also feel wonder in this second sense. So I feel wonder before nature, beautiful nature, but also before cruel and evil nature. I feel wonder before the mystery of life, but also before the mystery of evil that is part of a human sense. And normally I see that our instinct, when we talk about sublime and wonder, we normally focus on the birth of a new baby and the beauty of nature and the wilderness of nature. I wanted today to focus more on this darker side, because there I think we can find a kind of wonder and sublime that can be appreciated, especially at this time when we've been experiencing a pandemic over the last few months. Well, I do understand what you are insisting on, because many people, as we said before, asked this kind of question, no? Because many people said, well, you talk about wonder in this year's meeting, but how can that be before all these terrible events around us? Well, in fact, we've had moments of wonder, of great amazement that really can be helpful to face challenges. Before, you refer to concentration camps and gulags, and we have examples of people that really helped in a heroic way, people that were suffering a lot, and we have testimony of this, and this is a wonder, because this is a kind of strength that is really amazing. Well, I'm sure that in many cases what happened is exactly what you've just said. That's possible. I don't want to say that's not the case, but it is a bit of a mystery. With your second question, you asked about the origin of all this. Perhaps an important element about this experience of wonder, that we can wonder before the world we live in, I cannot deny that this happens. Of course, here there's faithful people. We can take this for granted, couldn't we? I beg your pardon. There's terrible situations, and in these terrible situations, there's people that didn't lose their faith, and they faced death without losing their faith. This is also wonder. This is also sublime, and it's worth mentioning it. This sort of loyalty towards the Almighty, notwithstanding the challenges posed by life that can question everything and it can make you ask the question, where were you, God? I'm talking about martyrs, for example. They are a wonder, a kind of wonder, and the Church says that explicitly. Yes, indeed. I had another question about another quote by Heschel. He says, "The complete manipulation of the world translates into the complete instrumentalization of the self." And this is an observation he made with reference to the cultural dimension that we live in. That is the idea of subjugating the world to our scientific and technical domain can be mirrored in the manipulation of the self. There is this idea of getting over the world with a sense of possession and subjecting it to our own measures, perhaps originates from the lack of wonder. We take an approach where we only put in place our endeavors without starting from the wonder and from the real meaning of what we have before. Who knows what he would have said if he lived during the era of the internet, of Facebook and all the digital tools. Well, this is a sort of speculation. To me, it's not just about instrumentalization. There's another way to express this idea. Is that we are losing our sovereignty. It looks like we are not making autonomous decision in a Kantian sense, but also in the sense of the Genesis. The decision of Eve in the story of Adam and Eve, the decision of Eve to take the forbidden fruit was an autonomous decision. It was a way to show moral autonomy, and being disobedient is a sign of sovereignty. We can debate over this for days, whether that was good or bad, and I'm sure that we would not reach an agreement, so let's not go there. We can do that another time. I've already given a lecture on the Bible here at the meeting, and I could see the reaction of the audience that, but it is the meeting amongst of the friendship amongst people, so people can also disagree.
The instrumentalization has a great danger, that is to say that we kind of lose this autonomy instead of being sovereign, instead of taking our own decisions on our own lives with our will, our conscience, by saying, I decide my own destiny. I decide how I want to spend my life, what I want to do. We become more and more addicted to this technology. Sometimes we think we are taking autonomous decision, but actually we are manipulated. So I think, well, Heschel didn't live in the reality of internet, but also in his own life. He was one of the first to walk hand in hand with Martin Luther King, for instance. So, well, I wonder, which is sublime, what they did in front of a racist society. It was also dangerous at the time. So I believe that he would have protested, not only because of the instrumentalization, but also the consequences of this instrumentalization, because we are losing our sovereignty. We cannot master our destiny. We cannot decide for ourselves. There are so many aspects in Giussani in this. Also, Pope John Paul II and Benedict XVI, well, they said that the most important freedom is religious freedom. And then in the Ratisbona speech, he said the freedom to say no to God, because the decision to say yes needs to be a sovereign decision. I know this is my choice, and I decided to say yes to God. I'm not, in a way, built to say yes, programmed to say yes. I want to say yes. So there is a work by Dostoevsky saying that we are against God because God gave us freedom, and freedom brings with itself risks. So how could a person so wicked like Dostoevsky write such a sublime work of art? Novel. Only God can give an answer to this. There are so many different examples. Bad people who created wonderful things. Wagner, for instance. There's a very long list. Well, maybe because inside these people there is the germ of a wonder that they have met in their life. I am too much attached to the Old Testament. I cannot forgive and forget. Mankind will not die because of a lack of information, but for a lack of appreciation. So that means that knowledge in itself is not enough if, and I let you conclude this sentence, you tell me, because the knowledge, all the information, all this does not become an awareness of the self, the world doesn't change, and this is the result of a recognition. But Heschel had a very particular perception of knowledge. Philosophers talk about epistemology, as we know, and in one of his works, he wrote, well, if you want to read Heschel, you have to read Man is Not Alone. Well, obviously Man is not alone because there is God. Then there is a second book, God Looking for Man. So what does this mean? I think that I have already explained this, because God waits for us to make the right choices, to live the potential sublime we have as human beings. But in his first book, The Prophets, well, it's a more difficult book to read, so to speak, but there is a paragraph in that book that is actually the only thing I really remember about this book, because I read it about 30 years ago. And it says there are two ways to know the world. A cognitive way, we want to know about love, We can read an essay by Stendhal, for instance, on what is love, or a poem by Shakespeare on love. But if you fall in love, it is completely different. You really understand love in a completely different way through your experience of love. And this is actually in line with this last sentence you quoted. You cannot just explain someone what love is. You should love someone so that he can actually, or she can actually feel love.
Ma a questo punto torno ancora, secondo te?
So I'm going back to what we were saying before. If someone looks at the sky full of stars, and knowing that these are 15 billion light years, and then one looks at one's own hand, and here I go back to what you were saying, which I found extremely interesting. This does not open up your heart and so that you can actually face the challenges you were talking about. So I'll take this example from another point of view. So we have these stars. Not even Einstein could understand what what the universe is. And then we have another example, and I know you like this. I am more surprised if I think about that Catholic Church in Trieste who saved the lives of my relatives. Then I can even wonder at the beauty of stars and so on and so forth. But I'm just saying that they are both wonder. I would like really to understand this family in Trieste who risked their lives to save the life of another family, took their the strength to do so from inside themselves, from their education, their upbringing, the fact that they were real Christians, and not from looking at the stars. But I'm joking. They were looking at the stars inside of them, not in the sky. But I'm just joking, sorry.
So che in questo dialogo è emerso.
Well, I'd say that from this title in a way is provocative. Yeah, it's great, it's fantastic. First of all, the choice of Eschel was a great thinker, a great philosopher. It really needs to be read. And then this title, the sentence, in a moment during a pandemic like now, is very challenging. And this is, well, I must say I was really happy when you asked me to talk about this. And I said before, I think it is wonderful that you actually insisted on organizing the meeting. And let's go back to our quotation from the Genesis. As long as the earth endures, the autumn and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, and the meeting will never cease.
Io penso che questo sia il...
Well, I think this is the best way to close this session with this wish for next year. So let's meet again next year.
Ti ringrazio.
And thank you. And don't forget to invite me again. You are already invited. Thank you for this interesting debate, for your provocative interventions. Well, to provoke means to underline so many or single out so many questions and aspects regarding life, because a dialogue is something that enriches everyone. Tonight I will look at the stars with much more attention. So thank you all for being here tonight, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the meeting. Good night, everyone.
Come si fa ora?
Sì, si fa così. Grazie.